years. And I've been working primarily recently in the governance space, but also with Microsoft Fabric and Power BI as well. So happy to have everybody on board. Just as Paul maybe just mentioned previously, I will be looking to have him sort of moderate the Q&A. And so if there's questions that come in from the question and answer pane, just put those in there, and Paul will moderate those and interject if there's questions or if there's things that he can answer primarily on his own. So yes, welcome aboard. So first of all, I'm just going to walk through a little bit of an introduction. So today we're going to take a look at Microsoft Purview, including why and the reasoning behind why Purview is becoming more and more popular within the marketplace. Specifically, I'll be focusing on the new exciting features which have been rolled out within the last couple of weeks here within Purview. There's a new release that was just done on the 1st of September, and there's been a number of really amazing advancements in a number of areas, including data products, associated data quality, data profiling, being able to identify business domains, among other things as well. So I'm hoping I'll be able to walk through very quickly over the next 10 or 15 minutes some initial slides during this presentation, and then I'm hoping to spend the remainder of the time exploring the Purview data governance functionality by role-playing a number of personas within a typical organization. So I'm going to be kind of focusing in on 3 different personas as we go through as part of the demo. And as Paul mentioned, toward the end of the presentation, we're hoping to reserve some time for questions. So let's begin. So just before getting into Purview itself, I just want to give a little bit of a brief introduction about the company itself. For those who are not familiar with SDK Tech, we are a boutique analytics consulting firm, primarily based out of Calgary with about 100 employees. At the end of the day, we are a data company. So we have multiple lines of businesses, including data DevOps, data science, machine learning, data engineering, and data visualization. We also offer services related to platform operations in order to build the necessary resources needed for data projects and initiatives. We've also developed in-house customized orchestration modules to seamlessly schedule workflows to manage data activities across these various silos. Once a project has been successfully developed and deployed, we have a robust monitoring and support organization, which can be leveraged for longer-term support, break fix, and enhancement initiatives. We have an offshore team located in Chennai, India, to provide, if necessary, North American 24/7 support, providing additional backing for mission-critical data analytics products and processes. So we serve effectively the entire gamut of data as an organization, and really that's sort of our heart where we live in this IT environment. As I just mentioned, we have about 100 consultants across Canada. We're primarily focused in Calgary, but we have offices as well in Vernon, BC, and Edmonton, Toronto, Montreal, and Halifax. And more recently, over the last few months, we've also brought on some consultants from Vancouver and Hamilton as well, just to kind of shore up the overall coverage across the entire country. We have about 25 enterprise customers, but that number is growing, somewhat exponentially. We have a lot of interest in our products and solutions. And so that number is, I say, growing very well. We were established in 2016, so we're about 8 years old, and looking forward to celebrating our 10th anniversary here fairly soon. So from a partnership perspective, SDK Tech does have a number of partnerships with a number of leading data technology companies. So we have strategic partnerships with Microsoft, especially in the data and analytics space, artificial intelligence, digital applications, and innovations. We also have partnerships as well with Databricks and Snowflake, and our consultants drive to maintain and upgrade our skills via certifications with all 3 companies to ensure we are providing innovative solutions using all of these platforms. And so these are some of the key platforms, but we dabble in others as well, but these are the ones that we partnership primarily with. From a customer's perspective, this is really where a lot of our success has risen from. And so we have a number of customers, and just for the sake of brevity, I'm not going to go through and review each one, but we have a number of successful projects that we've run across many industries, including oil and gas, natural resources, transportation, and other public sector areas as well. So this is just a snapshot of sort of the breadth of what we've done over the last 8 years, and we've seen quite a bit of success from that model. So now I actually want to begin talking about what Purview is. So let's begin. Why are we interested in looking at Purview for the features that it offers? I just want to start by investigating the business drivers that are causing an ever increasing need for modern data governance and data management best practices and strategies. What are the major obstacles and hurdles faced by enterprises preventing an evolution in data governance maturity? Businesses are almost always dealing with serious and significant challenges in their data analytics environments and overall data landscape. Any one of the issues listed here could be potentially causing a failure to adopt a data analytics program, solutions, or products. I just want to take a look at some of the outlined areas here on the slide. For the sake of time, I do want to spend most of the time, as I mentioned in the demo, so I'll sort of highlight maybe a few of these, but certainly any of these 7, as I mentioned, is sort of critical to defining the data governance platform and why we want to use that. So the first item I want to talk about here in the top left is the what we call the data lexicon profile challenge. So when reviewing and discussing technical solutions, much of the inherent knowledge, business background, and context is not well understood. Much of this type of information is held within the experience of subject matter experts who are often specialists within specific lines of business. Such information is not readily available and difficult to get a hold of and may require valuable time from these specialists to get answers to sometimes very basic questions. For example, the term equipment may have a completely different context between the oil and gas sector and the medical sector. In one context, equipment may mean mining or a mining truck, and the other it could mean an MRI machine. So without clear and concise business glossary terms and definitions, sometimes incorrect assumptions are made, costing the organization money and wasting valuable time. So that's sort of the first sort of perspective. The second perspective we're going to take a look at is the stakeholder trust challenge. And so really, oftentimes report users often do not trust the data being presented to them, or at least very skeptical of the data that's presented. Business users leveraging reporting tools such as Power BI, Tableau, and similar tools may not trust reporting numbers as they don't understand where the single source of truth lies. They fail to understand the level of cleansing and transformation which has been undertaken in an effort to produce or reproduce the numbers. So basically, there's just sort of a lack of knowledge or a lack of sort of mistrust there with that data. So moving on now to the data estate transparency challenge. Sometimes it is extremely problematic to obtain a global understanding of the complete range of data sources, either from Azure, other cloud environments such as Amazon Web Services, on-premises applications, or software as a service offerings, or SaaS offerings, in other words. In addition, knowing where the organization's structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data lives is typically a very difficult pursuit. Such a lack of knowledge can lead to incorrect tactics and strategies for data initiatives, since only a piecemeal or partial available, view of the picture is available at any one time. So this can be very, very error prone, and mistakes can be made quite seriously. Moving on now to the sensitive data governance challenges. There is often an unknown or at least very hazy picture of which assets are considered confidential, classified, restricted, or even have assets which have personally identifiable information within the data landscape. The effort to determine which assets are meeting these criteria is significant and very, very time consuming. Manual efforts are again often error prone and may not capture all necessary assets of concern, which may inadvertently lead to data breaches if specific data sets are believed to be safe or not, especially if data breaches are meant to be or believed to be safe, but in reality, they're truly not, right? So we have this sort of belief that we trust the data, but in reality, there may be some things that are preventing us from, doing that properly. So again, there's some other areas there sort of mimicking some of the other areas, but really any one of these items could be focusing on, or posing challenges, for an enterprise to adopt data governance very well. So moving on now to the Purview. So this is sort of how Purview is responding to the challenges that what I've just talked about. And so the first item that Purview offers is the ability to set up data sources, right? So the very first step is, if we're looking to understand where data lives, we have to understand what data sources we have. And so Purview has a number of connectors dealing with a myriad of different data sources. Registering new data sources into Purview is a very simple exercise, and I'll show that here briefly in the demo shortly. Data source scans are subsequently set up to execute the discovery of data assets from various sources, and then ingest those into the Purview repository. So basically, we do that registration piece, and then there's a scanning mechanism that we use to actually ingest those. These scans can be set up in an automated fashion, so maybe we want to run that on a weekly or monthly basis, or maybe even we want to run that just on an ad hoc basis, right? So if, for example, we want to refresh our data estate once we do a deployment into production, for example, then that's something that Purview can certainly offer. The next feature is sort of a data searchable, pardon me, a searchable data catalog feature, which sort of mimics sort of like an Amazon browsing experience. So imagine you're online and you're wanting to do some shopping on Amazon or some other retailer. What you can do is you can input your search term, and then there's a large list of suggestions that you can pick from, but you can also then do some additional filtering to restrict the result set into something that's a little bit more manageable until you're seeing the exact assets that you're looking for. So it's really meant to mimic that shopping experience and get to the assets that you're looking for very, very quickly. From a data curation perspective, Purview offers a wide range of curation options for further enriching the information available within an asset. So for example, you can add descriptions, glossary terms, classifications, owners and experts, among other attributes while reviewing a specific asset. And so this is sort of a major area that people are interested in, is being able to better curate and understand where their data is. And certainly if there's specific needs to customize classifications or things of that nature, then Purview can certainly help with that analysis and work. From a data lineage perspective, data lineage provides an end-to-end lineage for a data asset. So for an example, if I needed to change my methodology for ingesting content into my data lake, we can now see how many downstream analytics assets are impacted. So maybe I have a dimensional model with the DIMS and facts. Maybe I have some other semantic layers. Maybe I've got some Power BI reports, right? So when I'm sort of understanding better what is coming downstream, then I can better plan for those activities. Maybe from the other end, if I'm needing to make a change to a Power BI report, what assets do I actually need to examine from the source? So kind of looking at it from the reverse direction, if I've got a report or a series of reports that need to change, I can very, very quickly identify which data assets I need to update to make my report more functional. From a data estate overview perspective, Purview provides some built-in and embedded dashboards to provide an executive status as to the level of adoption of the data governance program and what proportion of assets have had curation either completed or at least initiated. This provides some visibility into the effectiveness of the Purview implementation at the organization and provides insights into how to improve adoption strategies by various stakeholders within the organization. So, for example, if I have a curation activity which is falling a little bit behind, I can see some dashboards that might sort of reflect that and then provide some actions that I can actually perform to make those metrics a little bit better. So Purview has some of that excellent capability. From a customization perspective, depending on the nature of the organization, SDK is fully willing to support further analysis or specific areas if we want to look at different subject areas or use cases to ensure that Purview is set up as quickly as possible, right? So that the organization can immediately gain value by using Purview as quickly as possible. So, if there's different use cases or scenarios that are sort of as a priority for the organization, then, we can certainly go in and get those set up as quickly as possible. One of the sort of mantras that we have here at SDK is to get Purview up and running as quickly as possible so that people can start seeing immediate value from the tool to understand what their data catalog looks like, understand what the inventory looks like, understand where there might be some areas of concern. And so that's sort of one of the features that we sort of offer to the marketplace. One of the other nice things is we do have the ability to leverage the API suite within Purview. And so even as powerful as Purview is, there's often times where we just wish Purview could do a little bit more. And so SDK has built out a Purview Manager solution, which I'll discuss here in the next slide very quickly, but it does provide some very powerful functionality to augment existing out-of-the-box features from Purview. In addition, since we are using the Apache API Atlas, we have a number of functions and features that we can use to custom build additional features or functions that we want that are within Purview. And just lastly, from a data quality and health perspective, one of the things that was sort of requested by many, many clients to the Microsoft engineering team was to be able to explore data quality and profiling capabilities. And so now, good news now with the release here at the beginning of September, the Microsoft team has responded by providing a lot of powerful data quality and data profiling functionality, which I'll demo here shortly. And then we have a number of reports where we summarize that data quality and present it to users so that we can, again, can identify which actions can be taken to improve those health scores, right? So it's a very powerful mechanism. So just lastly here, moving on now to the Purview Manager solution that I just briefly mentioned. There are a number of activities that we've built out sort of customized within SDK Tech to look at providing some augmented features for Purview. And so we have sort of this concept of a configuration efficiency where, if I'm setting up Purview, right, if I have maybe one or two data sources within Purview, I can set that up quite simply. But if I'm working within a big organization and I may have, several hundred or even 1,000 different data sources, the mechanism to create data sources can become quite overwhelming and take a lot of time. And so Purview Manager offers a data-driven approach to the creation of new data objects. So basically, we configure a database table and then we push out those changes. And so we're not needing to replicate those same sort of tedious activities over and over again. And this is a huge time saver for deploying organizations, especially to a new organization. Sort of along a similar line, if there's a need to move or update or delete a large number of assets within an enterprise Purview implementation, we have the ability to do a lot of that type of work very quickly as well. And so, again, if I want to move one or two assets, around the environment, that's fine. But if I'm looking at a larger data lake implementation, for example, and I have 100,000 assets that I'm looking at, then that's going to be really, really tedious. And so that's sort of one of the reasons why we have built out Purview Manager as well to handle some of those other areas of movement. So the other thing too is just looking at the code base, as I briefly mentioned before, we have the ability to tap into the Microsoft API for Purview, and we want to be able to leverage that sort of suite of tools so that we can build some functionality, right? So if there was a customized need within your organization to do something a little bit more novel, which Purview doesn't do out of the box, then we have the expertise in-house to help you develop that solution using API to drive out some more features, which may be a little bit more attractive to the organization. From a deployment perspective, one of the really nice things is being able to sort of build out the environment once and then, have some sort of turnkey solutions to deploy that to a new environment. So basically, for example, if we set up a set of collections within the dev environment, for example, we want to make sure that we set that up in the same manner in our QUT and our prod environment, for example. Then using Purview Manager guarantees that these collections will be identical to what was tested, and the risk of manual user error is greatly reduced, if not totally eliminated. So it's one of the other nice features is that we have some automated deployments that we can do as well. And then from a disaster recovery scenario, just lastly, imagine the scenario where you have, your Purview account has been completely lost. then using the sort of disaster recovery approach, we actually have the ability to very quickly get that back to where it should be by using some of the Purview Manager functionality. And just before we get into the demo, this is sort of just getting into the breadth of the offering. And so, as I mentioned, we have the ability to look at a number of different data sources. So whether it's be on-prem, whether it be in the cloud, we have multi-cloud solutions. So we can pull against AWS or Google, for example. And then obviously we have the ability to pull our data sets as well from Azure, right? So because it's a Microsoft product, Azure has a very strong presence within Purview, and so we have the ability to do that as well. So that's sort of Purview in a high-level nutshell. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to go into the demo. And Paul, maybe I'll just quickly ask, has there been any questions or any further comments that are coming from the Q&A?
No, haven't been any questions yet, Eric, but if anyone does have any questions, just feel free to pop them in the chat and I'll bubble them up to Eric.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, I'm going to spend the next 15 or 20 minutes here talking about sort of Purview as more of a demo. And so this is sort of the landing screen that people will see as they come into Purview. And so from a, oops, I switched over, just give me a second. And so from a portal perspective, this is sort of what it looks like. For many, or for some of you maybe who have maybe seen Purview in the past, potentially, what they've done here is they've actually combined the data governance sort of portal sort of in combination now with some of the other areas of functionality. So things like security and data compliance and things like that. So this is a new portal which was just released at the beginning of the month. And so if I look at all of my solutions here within the environment, I can see very quickly that, again, it's all within the same portal. So I have the risk and compliance, data governance, data security pieces all sort of in one portal. And this is nice because the previous version had multiple different portals that you needed to go to. So now they've sort of tied those all together into a very sort of rich environment, sort of a one-stop shop. And as you may have seen just before I move to this page, we also have related portals to some of the other Microsoft products, right? So maybe, for example, you've got some analytics tools or products within the Microsoft Fabric area, or maybe you're using Microsoft Defender for your security, right? So there's other sort of links here as well. So for our discussion here today, we're going to be talking about the data map and the data catalog. And so if I go to the core, you'll see we've got the data map. And then if I go to data governance, you'll see we have the data catalog. And so that's where we're going to be focusing in on here today. So I'm going to start with the data map. And so one of the first things we're going to look at is our data sources. So in a scenario, I'm going to, I was talking about those three different personas that I was talking about earlier. The first persona I'm going to look at is sort of a data source administrator, or even maybe like a data steward. So we have this sort of concept of a data map, and I'm just going to bring this in a little bit better so you can see it. And so within the data map, we have the ability to set up a number of what we call data domains, right? And so I might have a domain for sales, I might have one for HR, I might have one for legal, one for IT, etc. So within the organization, I can sort of logically kind of create a hierarchy to identify sort of logical groupings within an organization. So within sales, for example, I may have sort of a further hierarchy where maybe I've got some consumers, maybe I've got some data analysts, maybe I may have some executives, for example. So we have the ability to kind of, customize and create a collection hierarchy that makes sense to the organization. But we also have the ability to set up data sources within that as well. So say as a data administrator, I'm going to go in and I want to register a new data source. So I have the ability now to sort of register something. So if, for example, I have an SAP data source, I can very, very quickly choose that as the one I want to pick. And then you would set in your configurations, your connection information effectively, and then set that up as a registered data source. So that's quite simple. And then from once that data source is created, I'm going to just take a look at this one just as an example because it's already pre-created for me. But once I have that data source, in this case it's a SQL database, but once I have that set up, then I have the ability to set up what we call a scan. And so a scan, as I mentioned before, is sort of the mechanism to ingest your data assets into Purview. And so if I just edit this scan very quickly, I just go to continue. Once I have that data source registered and the sort of credentials defined, then I can actually start getting into picking and choosing which assets I want to ingest into my environment. So, in this case, just because of this example, I'm only interested in the COVID vaccine trends table, but if I had, many schemas or even many databases within that server, I can pull them all in, right? So this is sort of acting as the foundation for my data catalog and data inventory that we'll take a look at here shortly. So that's sort of the first step, is to scope your scan and to set up that data set so that other users within your organization can see what that looks like within Purview. So this is sort of a representative task within sort of a data administration kind of role. But now what I want to do is to look at the actual data catalog as well. And so just kind of coming in from a catalog perspective, we have this sort of concept of a data search. And this is where we start getting into the sort of Amazon-esque sort of functionality that I was talking about a bit earlier. And so in this case, I'm going to search for customers. So now I'm interested in, give me all the assets within the organization that might be tied to a customer, right? So we could be dealing with analytics tools like, data warehouses or data marts. We could be looking at operational applications. We could be looking at, any sort of applications that we're ingesting into Purview. We have the ability to look at that. And so you'll see here right away, we've got about 110 different results, which, might be a little bit sort of scary thinking about that number of assets just for customers. But, we have a number of customers. And then as you can see here, we start getting into a little bit more sort of almost fuzzy logic to sort of predict what tables might be or what assets might be included. So I really don't want to scan through all 110 assets to figure out what I want. So I'm going to start using some of these filters here on the left-hand side. So from a filters perspective, I have something called an endorsement. So I'm going to pick the assets that have been certified. And so what certification sort of represents is it provides a bit of a mechanism from within Purview to say, if I have a data asset which has sort of maybe an acceptable level of data quality, or maybe we have appropriate business rules to grant access to that asset, or maybe we have, a significant level of curation done, right? Then what we can say is, okay, well, now we have the knowledge, right? We have the ability to sort of set that as a certified. And so if I'm a developer, for example, and I'm wanting to create a report, then I know, for example, that this customer asset is certified and sort of endorsed by the business, so that this is sort of the best source of truth for that report, right? So typically speaking, this would be, like a data warehouse or some sort of other semantic layer that's well trusted within the organization. But we can set up rules to set up that certification process. So now that I understand what assets I have, I'm going to choose my customer asset specifically in this case. And now we can actually start seeing a little bit more depth of knowledge around this specific asset. So on the right-hand side here, right away, I can see that this is the sort of what we call the collection path. And so this is the level or the sort of hierarchy of collections where this asset sort of lives from a logical perspective. From a technical perspective, I can see my hierarchy as well. And so I can see, for example, this asset is coming from a data lake, and then it's coming from a data lake file system, and then a resource set ultimately within that file system. So if I was dealing with a SQL Server or something, I would see the database, the schema, the table, etc., right? So that I could very quickly understand. And then this is nice too, because if I want access to that asset, then I know exactly technically what to ask for. And then from a context perspective, if I say, hey, somebody grant me access to this, then people know that myself and my colleague Susan are the experts. And so this would be, for example, an expert is somebody who knows the data really well. So maybe it's a subject matter expert. Maybe Susan has some really great knowledge about, the customer, data within SDK. And so we can sort of tap her to provide a little bit more expertise. But from an authorization perspective, maybe we need Patrick, in this case, my boss, to allow access to that asset, right? So this kind of gets into some of the business process around securing and sort of providing authorization for different types of assets. So if we go back to the overview here just quickly, we have what we call classifications. And so we have the ability to create customized classifications. And so this one is customized that we've developed. So it's a personally identifiable information. And so basically what this classification is doing is it's scanning through the asset. So if I'm looking at a customer table, for example, it sort of goes through and understands, well, maybe we have a first name, we have a last name, we have a phone number, we have an email address. So if it has any of those sorts of fields, then we automatically classify it as being by, just so that we're not inadvertently, distributing information inadvertently to various third parties. And then if I go to the schema classification as an example, again, I have in this case 26 columns. Some of them are classified, some of them may have more than one classification. And so we have the ability to set that up very quickly. Anything here with this sort of little lightning bolt symbol is a recognition that it's sort of automated. And so right out of the box, as soon as you set up your scan, there's some sort of default classifications that Microsoft has provided, which say, if it sort of looks like and kind of feels like your first name, last name, then it will put in that designation for you. So certainly you can set up anything you want from a customized perspective, but there is some functionality right out of the box as well that you can use without any configuration. From a lineage perspective, this is sort of going back to what I was talking about earlier. And so this provides me a bit of a lineage trace to see where my data is going and where it's coming from. And so I have this resource set for customer. I can see that it's being loaded into another resource set, and ultimately it's being used by a Power BI report, right? So I have the ability to very, very quickly understand where my data is coming from. If I have, in this case, I have it's Databricks notebook that we've used to populate that. So what I can do now is I can switch to that asset. So now I'm kind of moving my context over to this Databricks piece. And so now I can very quickly understand, at a more macro level, where that notebook is being used and what sort of processes it interfaces with, right? So if this process has to change, I have the ability to do an impact assessment very quickly to say what assets upstream and downstream would need to change or would need to be regression tested, for example, to look at that, right? So that's sort of what that would look like. Just kind of moving on now to some of the new functionality now that Purview has provided here in September. We have the ability now to provide what we call business domains. And so this is sort of a similar concept to collections, but this kind of really now gets into almost individual lines of business. So you'll see here right away that I can see I've got multiple domains. Some of them are published, so these are sort of ready for consumption. We have one for policing, which is effectively retired, and then we have one for draft, which is basically just sort of in development, as it were, right? It's sort of just being created right now. Within that as well, we have what we call data products, right? So if I go to this retail domain, I have the ability to look at some data products, and you can already see here that we're starting to see some of the data quality scores that Purview is offering. So if I go to this one, I can see that within this business domain of retail, I have 3 different data products. And so a data product could be maybe a specific report or a semantic layer, or maybe a set of database tables or something. And so this is something that we can sort of configure. I'm going to pick the customer profile report just as an example. So within my data product, I can actually say, well, I have a number of data assets that sort of provide the level, or pardon me, the number of data assets that provide the individual data sets that comprise that product, right? So what I can do is I can very quickly take a look at that. And so if I go to my customer one, this is sort of similar to what we just looked at. Again, it sort of just brings up a similar sort of look and feel. So if I wanted to come at it from my product perspective, I can do that too. So yeah, now if I go back to data quality, we'll just take a look at this really quickly. So as I mentioned, we have the ability to set up some data quality rules. I have the ability to manage. So I can set up some new connections, or I can set up some scans. So if, for example, there's a significant new data set that's coming in, so maybe we've added a lot of new data into an existing system, and I want to understand what that data sort of quality and profiling is looking like, then what I can do is run a scan to test that out. So if I go to my customer profile report again, so I can individually see for some of these key assets what my score is looking at, right? So these ones here are looking very well. This one is fair. So I can go into that, and then I can sort of understand the rules that I've put in place. So if I look at my active rules for this data quality, I can see here, I've laid out some rules. So the customer ID can't be empty. The row GUID has to be unique. The last name can't be empty. We can't have duplicate email addresses, etc. So all of these rules are new, and we can configure those very quickly within Purview. We also have the ability to set up customized rules. So if there's very specific rules that are tied to your organization, then we can see that as well. The last thing I want to do before we get into questions is to take a look at some of the reporting now that's available within Purview. And so from a reporting perspective, we can see that we have a number of different things. And so if I'm interested, maybe I'm coming in as a senior leader, right? Maybe I'm the CIO or some other executive. I have the ability very nicely now to see how my data stewardship is being adopted across the enterprise. And so obviously, because this is our sort of demo environment, we're not looking at great metrics right now. We don't have a lot of assets that are being curated, but at least this provides a bit of an understanding now and a bit of a appreciation for the data governance and data stewardship roles. And so as the overall sort of length of the initiative goes on for data governance, and obviously these metrics would start to improve. But what I can also do is I can say, okay, well, I want to take a look at individual domains, right? So if there's specific areas that I'm responsible for, then I can very quickly see within my sales, for example, my sales domain, how am I doing? And again, because this is our demo, we're not doing very well, but you can improve that score over time. One of the other things as well is there's a new report for data quality, and this is actually really cool. This is brand new out of the box as of last week. And so now what this does is it actually provides an actual sort of summary of your data quality. And so based on the data quality rules that we've set up and scanned, we actually now have some very nice sort of dashboards that we can sort of use again to sort of summarize that data quality. And so if there's any areas of concern or things like that, then we can start taking a look at what the health actions are. So if I want to look at my health actions, I can see these are sort of prescriptive actions that you can take as an organization to sort of better prepare or better improve your data quality. And so if I look at this one here, I can see that my data quality is abnormally high because of null counts. And so what I can do is I can say, well, that's in progress. I've assigned that to one of my colleagues, Sophia. And then she can go through and sort of carry on the activities to improve that, once she has the capability. So that's sort of a nice feature as well, is that even though you may see that your data quality is, poor maybe in some areas, at least there's some health actions that are prescribed to improve that score. So that's pretty much it, I think, for the demo. There's nothing else really that I wanted to talk about. We are kind of running out of time here a little bit, but just wondering if there's any further questions or concerns around what I've talked about here today.
If anyone does have any questions, I'm happy to address those. If you'd like to raise your hand, we can unmute you, or you can drop your questions into the chat. This meeting chat will exist after the meeting, so you can do that later at that time as well. I've also dropped a little note in there that if anyone does want to have the half-day Purview assessment that we offer free of charge, they can reach out to me, or they can look at the Microsoft Azure website. I left a link in there as well. And we do offer that half-day session so that we can look at your specific environment and we can do a bit of a discovery consulting for you as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, this is sort of just sort of the last slide, just talking about sort of what the next steps would be. And, as Paul mentioned, we do offer a half-day session in case you wanted to dig in this a little bit more. We're certainly more than happy to look at targeted presentations and targeted demos if there's specific areas that you're interested in, or specific features that you're wanting to investigate a bit further. Likewise, if there's further interest in the Purview Manager application I was talking about earlier, then let us know, and I'm certainly willing to facilitate that conversation as well. Well, just lastly, thank you very much again for your time here today. I really appreciate speaking with you for about 45 minutes here about Purview. This is sort of just the beginning, I'm hoping, of your journey.